Guys, good evening. Hope everybody's doing well. So I've just finished my first week of my CRPS Awareness Challenge, and I've been speaking all about that time just before and after your diagnosis, where learning new dynamics about your illness and what that means for your life. And now that we're going on to week 2, I want to change the focus a little bit to kind of what it's like in your day-to-day life of trying to deal with your condition and understand it better. That's why I've decided to call this week Get Your Shit Together, because anyone who's suffering from an invisible illness will know that something we often get told is to pull ourselves together and just, carry on. And it's such a funny one because the obvious response is, well, if it was as easy as just pulling myself together, I would have done that by now. I don't really like sitting in bed all day. I don't really like being in pain. I've devoted this whole week to this so that when you are faced with people who ask you questions, you can give them the right response. And not only for that reason, but it makes you feel a lot calmer when something happens because you're able to explain to yourself why this is happening in your body at that moment and then what you could potentially do to help it. So the first thing that I want to talk about is actually your brain. The reason as to why you're in pain and feeling anxious or depressed, your memory's gone to hell, or anything like that, there's actually a really, really good reason for it, and it's worth understanding because next time you forget something of importance, you also will cut yourself a little bit of slack to say, okay, well, I understand why I have memory loss, and I understand it's something I have to work on, and I understand how it's linked to CRPS. So I want to focus on your brain, on your big chronic pain brain. So if we look at understanding what is CRPS, okay, it basically is our nervous system, our nerves that no longer working properly, where they think that there is something wrong with us, and they send messages to our brain saying, look, there's danger here. And in response, our brain is like, okay, danger, I need to act, I need to do something. Let's send pain through to the body so that we know, and this person consciously knows that something's wrong. Now, the whole thing about it is that there is nothing wrong with us. There's nothing physically wrong with us. We don't have any injury anymore, whether it's a twisted ankle or a broken leg or from an accident. That all heals, but the pain carries on. And that's because our nerves have rewired incorrectly, and they now still think that there's danger when there's nothing there anymore. And that's the first dynamic. Now, one thing that we previously thought that has actually been disproven now is that there's been one section of our brain that deals with pain, and that's actually not true. Pain is kind of a resourceful thing. Your pain will end up almost borrowing certain parts of your brain if it's to get a message across. Now, the difference between acute pain, which is when you just have an injury and recover, is that, okay, pain borrows those sections of your brain and says, alert, alert, and then you recover and then you move on. With chronic pain, it's more like a hijacking. And this is one of the things that starts to affect our actual brain function. So to give you an idea about the areas of your brain that pain can hijack, you're looking at everything from the parts that are devoted to memory, the parts that are devoted to problem solving, to your cognition, to your fight or flight, to your motivation, to your fear, to the addiction side of your brain, the concentration, the focus, and even your movement, your muscular movement. So basically, all of these functions that are temporarily incapacitated by your pain in an acute situation are now continuously being taken over by pain when it's in a chronic situation. So one thing that we all have a pretty good understanding about is when we are faced with danger, our bodies trigger a flight or fight response. And that flight or fight response that we get is initiated by the release of two chemicals, adrenaline and cortisol. And both of these chemicals basically redirect as much energy as they can into our brains and our muscles and our heart, so that we can give the most logical fight or flight response for ourselves. So what then happens is this massive kind of fluctuation of chemicals and this increase of adrenaline and cortisol puts all the emphasis on the parts of our brain necessary for that survival instinct, and then our muscles and our heart, and slows down any other process that isn't necessary to have when you're in a dangerous situation. To give you a bit of an idea, imagine you're being hijacked, right? So if you're being hijacked, all of a sudden you're very stressed. You want to know what the best thing is to do to stay alive at that moment. The last thing on your mind is, are you feeling a little hungry? Should you chat up the good-looking girl or guy next door that you've been eyeing out now? When was the last time you went to go have your hair cut? These are all non-essential thoughts that are not necessary when you're trying to deal with a survival situation. So this is a really important response that we have as humans. It keeps us alive. And basically, with chronic pain, our bodies have just decided that it's important to have it on all the time. And that's really the fundamentals of CRPS. Now, what does that do? So if your cortisol levels, which cortisol is known as the stress hormone, are always high, then your brain is always preparing for that dangerous situation. It means that all the focus is on your muscles and your survival parts of your brain. And the rest of your brain kind of starts to reconnect its neural pathways, and they start to become a lot less strong and a lot less active because they're not being used anymore. All of a sudden, all that's happening is that your brain has been hijacked by pain, and all that's being processed is the fact that you're in danger and that situation needs to be resolved. So anything else that's not survival, not part of your survival kit, starts to become more faulty, and that includes your emotions. So depression, anxiety, memory loss, all these things that you're feeling right now are 100% justified. And they're not just justified because maybe you are not sleeping well or anything like that. They're justified because your condition is actively changing your brain. And resolving it and finding ways to improve your brain function takes time. So if someone's frustrated with you because you've forgotten an appointment, or you're feeling quite anxious that day about absolutely nothing, it's understandable. The most important thing to take away from this episode is to cut yourself a little bit of slack. So if someone comes to you and tells you, you pull yourself together, why did you forget lunch, or why did you do this or that, or, stop feeling so depressed. There are people out there who are worse off than you. That's another one. You can now calmly and diplomatically explain to them how, on a biological level, everything is being affected, including your mental health. And if you can shut down that conflict immediately by giving them a knowledgeable response, then you avoid using more energy to kind of argue with that person about something that right now is not completely under your control. Once you understand how pain affects your brain, then you can start putting the steps in place to improve your brain function. So some of the things that I like to do on a daily basis to just kind of keep it exercised is do problem solving tests. I've got an app on my phone that I can do basic problem solving. It just helps me keep my brain function moving. Always try and do memory games. Memory games are a great thing to help exercise that part of your brain. The other thing is that, don't kid yourself. You will forget stuff and things will happen. So be proactive about it. At night before I go to bed, or whenever I have a light bulb moment or something I need to do, I write it down. We will be talking about it more this week as we discuss more about getting your shit together. I want to thank you all so much for following me for my first week of my challenge. I hope you've been enjoying everything I've put together for you so far. If you have any questions, please send them through to me. Pop them in the comment section. I will be speaking to chronic pain specialists in the last week of my CRPS challenge. So any concerns or queries you have that you want to have addressed, let me know. Okay, thanks guys. Have a good night. Bye.